Right, so if you're watching this at a sensible hour, good for you. If you're watching this at 1:30 in the morning with the brightness turned all the way down because you've got work tomorrow and sleep has just completely refused to cooperate, welcome. That's probably who this is for, honestly. What we're doing tonight is going through the entire Star Wars timeline. All of it, in order, from the very beginning of this galaxy's history right the way through to the end of the Skywalker saga and into the stuff that came after. We're going to take our time with it. There's no rush. This isn't a 10-minute breakdown. This is the kind of video you put on when you want the room to feel a bit less quiet and you've got something comfortable to think about. And I'll say now, if you've never seen a Star Wars film, that's fine. You don't need to have. I'll explain what needs explaining, and the rest of it, I think you'll pick up as we go. It's not actually that complicated when you slow down and take it a section at a time. It just looks complicated because there's a lot of it. There's quite a lot of it. The thing that I find genuinely fascinating about this universe, and I've spent a somewhat embarrassing amount of time thinking about this, is that most people's mental image of Star Wars, the lightsabers, the Death Star, Luke Skywalker, all of that is actually happening in a tiny sliver of a much, much longer history. The galaxy has been civilized for tens of thousands of years before any of the films begin. The Republic we see crumbling in the prequels is ancient when we first encounter it. The Jedi Order that Anakin joins is already over 1,000 years into a particular form it had taken after a devastating war. Everything we think of as the main story is really more like the final chapter of a very long book, and there's something quite restful about that, I think. This galaxy keeps going regardless. The Sith appear and disappear. Empires rise and fall. People make terrible decisions and good ones, and ones that are somewhere in between. And the stars just carry on. We're going to follow all of it, roughly in order, and not particularly rush through any of it. If you enjoy this kind of long, unhurried content, the sort of video you can drift in and out of, there's a subscribe button somewhere on the page. No pressure at all, but I make a fair amount of this, so it might be worth it. Right, let's start at the actual beginning, which is quite a long time, before anyone we know was born. Before we get into anything you'd recognise, it helps to understand a few things about how time works in Star Wars. The entire calendar in this universe is measured relative to one specific event, the Battle of Yavin. That's the battle at the end of the very first film, 1977's A New Hope, where Luke Skywalker destroys the Death Star. Everything before that moment is measured in BBY, meaning before the Battle of Yavin. Everything after is ABY, after the Battle of Yavin. So when historians in this universe are dating things, they're essentially using that one moment, a farm boy and a proton torpedo, as the pivot point of galactic history. Which says something, honestly. Now, the galaxy itself has been going for an extraordinarily long time before any of our characters were born. The Jedi Order is over 25,000 years old when Anakin Skywalker turns up. The Galactic Republic, the government we see collapsing in the prequels, has been running, in some form, for about the same length of time. To put that in some kind of perspective, 12,000 years ago on Earth, humans were just beginning to develop agriculture. The woolly mammoth was still around, and in a galaxy far, far away, people were already arguing about parliamentary procedure on Coruscant. The Force is the central fact of this universe. It's an energy field generated by all living things, binding the galaxy together, flowing through everything. Two main traditions grew up around it over the millennia. Those who believe in using the Force in harmony and balance, the Jedi, and those who seek to dominate and control it through passion and power, the Sith. The history of the galaxy is largely the history of those two traditions fighting each other, losing each other, finding each other again. There's a particular moment around 1,000 years before the films begin that's worth noting. The Sith had spent centuries as proper armies, huge numbers of practitioners, grand battles, the whole thing. Then came a Sith Lord called Darth Bane, who looked at this arrangement and decided it was fundamentally flawed. Too many Sith meant too much competition, too much infighting, too many power struggles. So Bane restructured the entire tradition around what he called the Rule of Two. From that point on, there would always be exactly two Sith, a master and an apprentice. No more, no less. The master holds the power, the apprentice craves it. When the apprentice is strong enough to kill the master, they become the master and take on a new apprentice of their own. Always two. This decision matters enormously for everything that comes later, because what it meant in practice was that the Sith spent the next 1,000 years in complete secrecy. No armies, no visible presence, just two people operating in shadow, accumulating influence, pulling strings. By the time of the prequel films, the Jedi Council genuinely believes the Sith are extinct. They've been saying the Sith have been destroyed for 1,000 years, and they mean it. They are not right. The galaxy, in the centuries before our story begins, is mostly peaceful, mostly prosperous, mostly confident. There's crime and poverty, and all the usual things. It's not a utopia, but the Republic is functional, the Jedi are trusted, and the worst problems anyone expects to face are political rather than existential. That's about to change rather significantly. One thing I find worth expanding on is how different cultures in the Star Wars universe understand the Force, because it's not as monolithic as the Jedi-Sith binary makes it seem. Throughout the galaxy's history, there have been dozens of different Force traditions. The Night Sisters of Dathomir, who we'll meet in a few sections, use a kind of magic that draws on the same energy, but in ways the Jedi Order would find deeply uncomfortable. The Jedi are, in some sense, one tradition among many, who all stumbled onto the same energy and built very different philosophies around it. The Jedi's particular philosophy, surrendering attachment, serving the light, not seeking personal power, is genuinely admirable, and it's also, over several thousand years, become something of a bureaucracy. The High Republic Jedi are still somewhat loose with these principles, still figuring out how they apply in practice. By the time of the prequels, the guidelines have calcified into rules, and the rules have calcified into assumptions, and the assumptions are making the Order brittle in specific ways it can't quite see. The midi-chlorians are worth a proper mention here as well, because people have been arguing about them since 1999, and the arguments are usually somewhat adjacent to the actual point. Midi-chlorians are biological organisms that exist in all living cells, and their concentration in a person's cells correlates with their sensitivity to the Force. The more of them you have, the more easily the Force flows through you. They're not the Force itself, and they don't create the Force. They're more like a kind of receiver, a biological structure that allows some people to perceive and interact with an energy that exists regardless of whether anyone can perceive it. Qui-Gon explains this to Anakin in the Phantom Menace, and the scene gets a slightly awkward reception because it sounds like a medical reading rather than mysticism, but it's actually consistent with the rest of what we know about the Force. It's not magic, it's a natural phenomenon that happens to look like magic from a certain angle. The Sith, in their earliest forms, were not the two-person shadow operation. They became under Darth Bane's Rule of Two. They were an entire civilization, the Sith people, a species who were naturally strong in the dark side, who were eventually conquered by exiled Dark Jedi, and who merged with them to create a culture built around dark side philosophy. They had empires, they had wars, they were a visible known presence in the galaxy for thousands of years before the events of the prequel trilogy. The Rule of Two is Bane's response to watching those empires destroy themselves through internal power struggles, a radical downsizing of the entire tradition to its most essential and most dangerous form. One master, one apprentice, patience measured in centuries. What's quietly remarkable about this when you think about it is that Palpatine is the culmination of 1,000 years of planning. Not his planning specifically, the planning of every Sith who came before him, each one training an apprentice, each one contributing to a tradition that was designed from the start to eventually produce someone capable of taking over the galaxy. It's less like a conspiracy and more like a very long institutional program. Let's spend some time in what historians of this galaxy call the High Republic era. It runs from roughly 500 BBY to about 100 BBY, and it's the period when the Republic is at its most expansive, its most idealistic, its most genuinely optimistic about itself. The Jedi Order during this period looks quite different from what we see in the prequels. They're spread out across the galaxy, not concentrated on Coruscant. They're explorers as much as peacekeepers. They're extraordinarily diverse, different species, different Force traditions, all coexisting within the same general framework. There's something quite lovely about it, actually. One of the things that always struck me about the High Republic as a concept is how much it challenges the idea that the Jedi were always the austere, slightly cold institution we meet in Episode 1. They weren't. During this period, they're genuinely warm, curious. The Council exists, but it doesn't have the rigid, slightly paranoid energy it develops later. There's a sense that the Order is still figuring itself out, and figuring itself out with some enthusiasm. The novel Light of the Jedi, which kicks off the main High Republic publishing initiative, begins with the Great Hyperspace Disaster and follows the Jedi response to it. A Jedi Master named Avar Kriss coordinates the rescue effort across multiple systems simultaneously using the Force as a kind of communication network. She experiences the other Jedi in the field as music, essentially, each person a different note in a chord, and she conducts the rescue by harmonizing them. It's a beautiful concept, and it says something specific about how the Jedi of this era experience the Force collectively in a way we never quite see in the films. The Republic in this era is caught up in something called the Great Hyperspace Rush, a period of intensive exploration into the Outer Rim, opening new routes through hyperspace, establishing new settlements, pushing the boundaries of known space. They build a massive space station called Starlight Beacon, positioned deep in frontier space, designed to serve as a lighthouse of sorts, a navigation aid, a medical facility, a symbol of the Republic's reach. It's genuinely beautiful by all accounts. A beacon in the dark. Starlight Beacon deserves a moment. It's positioned in the frontier, designed as a place where ships can dock and resupply, where the Republic's medical services can reach people who'd otherwise be too far out, where diplomacy can happen in neutral space. It's also, in its very existence, a statement. The Republic believes in this frontier, believes there are people out here worth reaching. The Jedi assigned to it are doing something that looks quite different from the combat-focused Jedi Council of the prequel era. They're healers, mediators, explorers. There's an open quality to the Order here that I find genuinely appealing. Around 232 BBY, something terrible happens that rather disrupts the mood. A freight vessel called the Legacy Run is destroyed while travelling through hyperspace. The wreckage shoots outward at hyperspace velocities, which means pieces of a ship the size of buildings are flying through populated systems faster than anyone can respond to them. The destruction is enormous. Whole moons are damaged. The Hetzel system comes very close to being wiped out entirely. The group that takes advantage of this disaster is the Nihil. They're essentially space raiders, but with a distinctive trick. They can navigate hyperspace using what they call paths, routes through hyperspace that nobody else knows about, allowing them to appear and disappear from battles with unsettling unpredictability. They're led, eventually, by a man named Martian Rowe, who has his own agenda that runs considerably deeper than simple piracy. The Nihil, as villains go, are interesting because they're not ideological. They're not Sith, they're not separatists, they don't have a political program. They're raiders with a practical advantage, the paths, and a charismatic leader who is catastrophically good at exploiting chaos. Martian Rowe isn't passionate about destroying the Republic. He's methodical about it. He doesn't want power for its own sake. He wants a specific thing, and dismantling the Republic's optimism is the method rather than the goal. That clinical quality makes him more unsettling than a straightforwardly angry villain. The destruction of Starlight Beacon, when it comes, is the moment the High Republic era turns decisively. Not because of the practical loss, though that's significant, but because of what it does to the collective psychology. The Republic was certain of its values, certain of its reach, certain that it was building something. Starlight Beacon was the symbol of that certainty. You can trace a direct line from Starlight Beacon falling to the Jedi Council of the prequels, who are cautious and institutional and quietly terrified of things they can't predict. The war between the Republic and the Nihil is long and painful, and it ends with Starlight Beacon destroyed and the Republic considerably less confident than it was. Fast forward to about 132 BBY, still in the High Republic era, towards its end, and we have The Acolyte, which is the one piece of live-action television set during this period. It's a murder mystery, essentially, involving a series of Jedi deaths that point towards dark side practitioners operating in secret. What's interesting about it is what it reveals about this era's blind spots. The Jedi are so convinced the Sith are gone that they've become genuinely complacent about the possibility of organized dark side activity. There are people in the shadows studying Sith techniques, maintaining traditions the Order thought were extinct. The Golden Age, it turns out, wasn't quite as complete as it looked. The Acolyte's central mystery, which we touched on, involves a group who have been practicing Sith philosophy in secret, not the actual Sith lineage descended from Darth Bane, but practitioners who found their own path to the dark side through a different tradition. This is actually consistent with what we've established. The Force traditions are not a binary, and if you go looking in the galaxy's edges, you'll find people who found their own interpretations. The horror of the Acolyte is partly that the Jedi can't see it, because they've been operating on the assumption that the only dark side threat that matters is the Sith, who are supposed to be extinct, so everything else must be something else. The High Republic doesn't end in a single catastrophe. It sort of fades. The Nihil Wars leave the Jedi more cautious, more concentrated, less spread out. The optimism dims. The institution becomes more formal, more guarded. By the time we reach the prequel era, most of what made the High Republic distinctive has quietly calcified into something more rigid. Worth noting that this process takes about 100 years. These things rarely happen quickly. Right. So this is where most people's familiarity with Star Wars actually begins, even though it's the fourth film George Lucas made. Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. 32 BBY, and the very first thing that happens, the opening scene of what is meant to be the beginning of a grand saga, is a trade dispute. Specifically, the Trade Federation, which is a massive commercial organization with its own private army, has blockaded the planet Nahbu. This is because of taxation on trade routes, which is a dispute being handled through the Senate, and the Trade Federation's response to being taxed is to put battleships in orbit above a peaceful planet. This is apparently legal. The Republic is maybe not as functional as it appears. 2 Jedi are sent to negotiate, Qui-Gon Jinn and his Padawan, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Qui-Gon is the one worth paying attention to here, because he's a fascinating character who doesn't quite fit the mold. He's a Jedi Master, clearly capable and respected, but he has a slightly complicated relationship with the Jedi Council. He trusts the living Force, the immediate, present moment dimension of the Force, more than the Council would like. He follows his instincts. He makes decisions that are not always officially sanctioned. In a more procedural organization, he'd be a management problem. In a story, he's the interesting one. Qui-Gon's belief in the living Force, the immediate, present moment dimension of the Force, rather than the cosmic, time-spanning version the Council tends to focus on, is what allows him to recognize Anakin. The Council feels disturbances in the Force at a macro scale. Qui-Gon feels this boy standing next to him. It's a different kind of attention, and it's the kind the prophecy requires someone to have. Whether the prophecy itself meant what Qui-Gon thought it meant is a question the saga takes a long time to answer. Balance to the Force could mean a lot of things. The Jedi in this period assume it means the Sith are defeated. They may not be entirely wrong about the ultimate destination, but they're quite wrong about what balance looks like on the way there. The negotiations go badly in roughly 30 seconds because the Trade Federation has decided to invade Naboo rather than negotiate with anyone. The Jedi escape to the planet, link up with the Gungans and amphibious native species, and eventually get the Queen of Naboo, 14-year-old Padme Amidala, who is doing rather a lot for a teenager, off the planet, and to Coruscant to plead her case to the Senate. On the way, they stop on Tatooine for repairs, and on Tatooine, Qui-Gon meets a 9-year-old boy called Anakin Skywalker. Tatooine comes up a lot in Star Wars, and it always bothers me slightly, in the nicest way, that a planet so remote and so thoroughly unpleasant keeps ending up at the centre of things. It's a desert world ruled by the Hutt crime families, with a severe moisture problem and very aggressive pod racing and an underground slave economy that the Republic officially disapproves of, but does nothing about because it's technically not within their jurisdiction. It's the kind of place that exists at the edge of maps. And yet Anakin Skywalker was born there, Luke Skywalker grew up there, Obi-Wan went into hiding there, Han Solo's most significant debt was owed to someone based there, and the saga's final scene is set there. The galaxy is a very large place with billions of planets, and the Skywalker family keeps ending up in this particular desert. Anakin is a slave. He and his mother Shmi were sold into slavery years ago and ended up on Tatooine, which is out in the Outer Rim, where Republic law doesn't really reach. He's also the most Force-sensitive person Qui-Gon has ever encountered. When Qui-Gon runs a blood test, there's a biological marker for Force sensitivity called midichlorians, organisms that exist within cells and mediate connection to the Force. Anakin's count is higher than anyone on record. Higher than Master Yoda. Qui-Gon, who believes in following the Force wherever it leads, immediately decides this child is the chosen one of an ancient prophecy. The one who will bring balance to the Force. This is quite a lot of pressure to put on a 9-year-old. Anakin wins a pod race to earn his freedom. Qui-Gon can't free Shmi as well, which is a detail that sits quietly and horribly for the next 2 films. They leave her behind on Tatooine, enslaved. Shmi Skywalker is a character who doesn't get as much attention as she should. She's a slave raising a gifted child in extremely difficult circumstances, and what she conveys in her brief screen time is real warmth and real dignity. Her goodbye to Anakin, "You can't stop change any more than you can stop the suns from setting," is the kind of thing a person says when they've made peace with things beyond their control. She knows she's not going with him. She lets him go anyway. That's the last thing Anakin Skywalker's mother does for him, and he never quite processes it. The film ends with the Battle of Naboo, in which the various threads come together. Anakin accidentally destroys the Trade Federation's command ship from inside it while trying not to crash. The surface battle ends, and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan face a Sith assassin named Darth Maul in a duel that is kinetic and genuinely impressive and ends with Qui-Gon being killed. Obi-Wan kills Maul in response, or appears to, and then makes a dying promise to Qui-Gon to train Anakin himself. The Jedi Council, which had refused to allow Qui-Gon to train Anakin, rather has to accept this now. Meanwhile, a senator named Palpatine from Naboo has been elected Supreme Chancellor of the Republic in the chaos of all this. He seems pleasant enough, measured, wise, genuinely concerned. Nobody is suspicious of him at all, which, if you know what's coming, is either impressive or alarming. The Phantom Menace is a film with a complicated reputation, and some of that reputation is fair, but the core of it, Qui-Gon's belief in this boy, the tragedy of Shmi left behind, the quiet ascent of a man we'll eventually know as the Emperor, those things work. They work quite well, actually. 10 years pass. Anakin Skywalker is now a Padawan, a Jedi apprentice, under Obi-Wan Kenobi's training. He is not a comfortable student. He's gifted beyond almost anyone in the Order, and he knows it. And he has the particular energy of someone who believes they could be learning faster if only the institution weren't holding them back. He and Obi-Wan genuinely care for each other, but they argue, constantly. There's friction that runs deeper than the ordinary friction of a teacher and student. Padme Amidala is now a senator for Naboo rather than its queen, and someone is trying to kill her. Anakin is assigned to protect her while Obi-Wan investigates the assassination attempts, and immediately the thing that's been quietly inevitable since they met 10 years ago starts happening. They fall in love. This is against Jedi rules. Attachment is prohibited by the Order, on the grounds that attachment leads to fear of loss and fear leads to the dark side, and all the rest of it. Anakin and Padme fall in love anyway, and keep it secret, and eventually get married in secret on Naboo. It's quietly lovely and quietly catastrophic. Obi-Wan's investigation leads him to Kumino, a water planet of professional cloners. Obi-Wan finds a massive clone army, hundreds of thousands strong, being grown on Kumino with 1 million more on the way. Grown from the genetic template of a Mandalorian bounty hunter named Jango Fett, commissioned, according to the Kaminoans, by a Jedi Master named Sith on behalf of the Republic about 10 years ago, without the Council's knowledge, and Sith has since died under unclear circumstances. The army is ready. The Republic didn't know it had one. On Geonosis, Obi-Wan discovers the other half of the picture, a separatist movement, thousands of systems threatening to leave the Republic, led by a man named Count Dooku. Dooku is a former Jedi, one of the most respected of his generation, who left the Order some years back, citing what he called the corruption of the Senate. He's elegant, patrician, principled seeming. He is also, secretly, Darth Tyrannus, Sith apprentice to Palpatine. The structure of what's been built here is worth sitting with for a moment. Palpatine, as a senator, helped orchestrate the crisis that got him elected Chancellor. Now as Chancellor, he secretly controls both sides of the emerging conflict. The separatist movement through Dooku, and the Republic through his position and his influence. The clone army created by a dead Jedi Master who was manipulated into ordering it? That's his too. He spent over a decade constructing a trap large enough to catch a civilization. The Clone Wars begin at Geonosis, where the Republic deploys its new clone army for the first time against the separatist droid forces. The Jedi find themselves suddenly, somewhat confusingly, in command of an army they didn't know existed 3 days ago. This is not a comfortable position for an order of monks. And there's one more thing that happens in this film that matters enormously, and happens quietly and away from any of the grand politics. Anakin goes to Tatooine because he's been having nightmares about his mother. He finds her. She was freed years ago, married a moisture farmer named Cliegg Lars, lived a decent life, and then was taken by a local Tusken Raider tribe and tortured for a month. Anakin arrives just in time for her to die in his arms. And then he does something that the film shows us with unusual directness. He kills everyone in the camp. Not just the ones who took her, all of them. Men, women, children. He comes back to the farm and tells Padme, and she doesn't leave him. They go to Geonosis and fight a battle and get married. And the whole time what he did is sitting there in the background, never quite addressed. That's the moment, probably, where the Sith begin to win. The gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith is 3 years, and most of it is covered by an animated series called The Clone Wars, which ran from 2008 through to 2020, with some interruptions. I'd say this is one of the most important pieces of the Star Wars puzzle for understanding the prequels, because the films give you Anakin Skywalker, but the series gives you a reason to care what happens to him. The Anakin Skywalker of the Clone Wars is warm, funny, fiercely loyal, genuinely brilliant in the field, He and Obi-Wan work together with the kind of ease that only comes from years of trust. He's a general the clones would follow anywhere, partly because he's gifted, and partly because he treats them as people, rather than equipment, which is more unusual than it should be. The clones themselves are worth a moment here, grown from a single genetic template, bred for war, never having chosen any of this, and yet the series takes considerable care to show that they're individuals. They have names they've given each other, preferences, friendships, a captain called Rex who is one of the most decent characters in the entire saga. The tragedy of what eventually happens to them is built slowly, over 7 seasons, until it's practically unbearable. The single most important new character introduced in the series is Ahsoka Tano, assigned as Anakin's Padawan at the beginning. She's 14, she's confident to the point of recklessness, and she has a habit of calling Anakin Sky Guy, which he hates. Their relationship over the course of the series is the emotional core of the whole thing. She becomes, genuinely, the best thing in Anakin's life that isn't Padme, someone he can be straightforwardly good to without any of the complication. He teaches her. She challenges him. They save each other repeatedly. The arc about Clovis, a senator and former associate of Padme's, who turns out to be more compromised than he appears, is interesting, less for its plot than for what it shows about Anakin. He is jealous in a way that's completely uncontrolled. He beats a man unconscious, essentially, because the man kissed Padme without her consent. This isn't a dark side moment played for horror. It's presented as the show acknowledging, honestly, that Anakin has a temper that scares him, that the attachment he feels for Padme is possessive in ways he can't fully govern. The show doesn't excuse it. It just shows it. There's also the matter of Darth Maul, who is not, as it turns out, dead. He survived being cut in half by Obi-Wan on sheer hatred and trauma, crawled to a junk world, went completely mad, rebuilt himself a pair of mechanical spider legs from scrap, and was eventually found by his brother, Savage Opress, and restored to something approaching coherence. He then goes on to build a criminal empire, kill some people Obi-Wan cares about deeply, and become a recurring problem. It's an absurd story, and it works completely. Ahsoka's departure from the Jedi Order is the arc that matters most in the whole series, probably. She's framed for a bombing she didn't commit. The Jedi Order, rather than standing by her, hands her over to the Republic for trial because the optics are bad, because the Council doesn't want to be seen as protecting one of their own, because the institutional calculation says let the trial happen and clear her through the process. She is cleared. The Council offers to reinstate her, as if the offer of reinstatement wipes out the experience of having been abandoned by the people she trusted most. She doesn't take the offer. She walks out of the temple and down the stairs into the city. Anakin watches her go. He doesn't stop her. He doesn't know how to stop her because she's right to go. The relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin through the series is also worth time. These are two people who genuinely love each other in the way that only people who've been through a great deal together can love each other. Obi-Wan teases Anakin constantly with the slightly exhausted affection of someone who has spent years managing a person who is both brilliant and exhausting. Anakin genuinely respects Obi-Wan in a way he respects almost nobody else. They argue about everything and agree when it matters and have each other's backs instinctively. The tragedy of Mustafar is partly the tragedy of what this becomes, and the Clone Wars makes that tragedy land properly because it's shown you what was there before. The Bad Batch connection is worth noting briefly. Clone Force 99, Crosshair, Tech, Hunter, Wrecker, and eventually Echo have irregular inhibitor chips from the start because their genetic modifications altered how the chips function. Crosshair's chip works. He goes with the Empire. The others don't, not properly. This becomes the basis of the show that follows, but even here in the series it's a useful illustration of the chip's nature. It's not entirely reliable. It just works well enough on the vast majority of clones to be catastrophic. The series also introduces, deep in its later seasons, a detail about the clone army that changes everything: the inhibitor chips. Every clone soldier has a chip implanted in their brain, installed at the cloning facility on Kuhmino, that will override their free will and force them to follow a specific command if it's ever given. The clones don't know about it. Most Jedi don't know about it. A clone trooper named Fives gets very close to uncovering the whole conspiracy and is killed for it. Order 66 is built on this. The chips are already inside the people who will eventually use them. The series ends with the Siege of Mandalore, which overlaps directly with the events of Revenge of the Sith. Ahsoka and Rex are escorting Maul off Mandalore when Order 66 is given, and Rex, who still has his inhibitor chip but remembers Fives' investigation, fights it long enough to warn her. They survive. The rest of the clones don't fight it at all. They just turn, and the Jedi they've been fighting alongside for 3 years become enemies in an instant. It's one of the most devastating sequences in the entire saga. The fact that it's animated doesn't make it any less so. The opening of Revenge of the Sith drops you into the middle of a battle above Coruscant. General Grievous, a cyborg commander of the separatist droid forces, has kidnapped Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Anakin and Obi-Wan fly in to rescue him, and it's clear immediately that these two people have been doing this for 3 years and have become very good at it. The banter is easy, the trust is complete. Whatever friction there was in Attack of the Clones has been replaced by something that looks very much like love, in the specific way that two people who've survived a great deal together arrive at love. They rescue the Chancellor. On the way out, Anakin kills Count Dooku at Palpatine's urging. The Count is disarmed and kneeling, and Palpatine says, "Do it." Anakin does. He knows immediately that it was wrong. Palpatine seems pleased. The crisis that builds through the rest of the film is Padmé's pregnancy, and specifically Anakin's visions of her dying in childbirth. Force visions are not always prophecy, but they're not nothing either. Anakin's last vision involving someone he loved was his mother, and he arrived just in time to watch her die. So when he starts having the same dream about Padmé, he can't dismiss it. He becomes obsessed with finding a way to prevent it. Palpatine, who has been carefully cultivating Anakin for years, chooses this moment to make his move. He tells Anakin, over an opera of all things, about a Sith legend, Darth Plagueis the Wise, who was so powerful in the dark side that he could manipulate life and death itself, who could keep the people he loved from dying. Palpatine implies with great care that he knows how this was done. Then Anakin discovers that Palpatine is the Sith Lord the Jedi have been looking for. He goes to Mace Windu. The Council moves to arrest Palpatine, and in the moment when Mace has Palpatine beaten and disarmed, Anakin chooses to intervene, cutting off Mace's hand, allowing Palpatine to kill him. Not because Anakin has gone evil, because he needs Palpatine alive, because Palpatine has promised him a way to save Padmé, and he can't let that possibility die. That moment of intervention, that single decision made in desperation out of love, is the hinge of the entire saga. Palpatine sends Order 66. Across the galaxy, clone troopers turn on the Jedi they've been fighting beside. The 501st Legion, Anakin's own unit, marches into the Jedi Temple. Yoda briefly duels Palpatine in his office, and then continues their fight into the Senate chamber, before ultimately retreating because he recognizes that the battle has already been lost, and surviving to fight another day matters more. Obi-Wan goes to Utapau, kills General Grievous, and barely escapes the clones sent to kill him. On Mustafar, a volcanic mining planet that Palpatine has sent the Separatist leadership to, ostensibly for safety, actually to be killed by Anakin, Padmé arrives with her droids, unaware Obi-Wan has stowed away. She's heard everything. She asks Anakin to come away with her, to leave all of this, to just go. He can't. He's gone too far, and some part of him knows it. When he sees Obi-Wan on the ramp of her ship, he assumes she betrayed him, and he force chokes her. He nearly kills the woman he started this entire catastrophe to save. The duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar is beautiful and horrible. It ends with Anakin burning on the banks of a lava river, destroyed, and Obi-Wan walking away from him because he can't bring himself to finish it. "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." He leaves. Padme dies in childbirth. Not from anything physical, she simply loses the will to live. The twins, Luke and Leia, are born. Bail Organa of Alderaan takes Leia. Obi-Wan takes Luke to Tatooine, to Anakin's stepfamily. Yoda goes into exile on Dagobah. The plan, such as it is to wait. The Empire begins. Palpatine stands before the Senate and declares it, and they cheer. Anakin breathes his first breath as Darth Vader. The galaxy goes dark. Here's something the films don't quite convey about the transition from Republic to Empire. It wasn't immediately obvious to most people how bad things were going to get. Palpatine presented the Empire as a response to the chaos of the Clone Wars, a stronger, more unified government that could maintain order. And for a significant portion of the galaxy's population, particularly those in the core worlds who'd been most directly affected by separatist attacks, that argument was initially compelling. Order is attractive when you've just lived through 3 years of war. The Bad Batch explores the very early Imperial period through a small unit of clone troopers with genetic mutations that gave them unique abilities. A tactician, an enhanced soldier, a sharpshooter, a technician, and eventually a young girl they rescued from Kumino. They survived Order 66 because their modifications meant their inhibitor chips didn't fully take hold. They spend their early Imperial years working as mercenaries, slowly figuring out what the Empire actually is, what it's building, what it means for the people they meet. It's a quiet sort of show, much of the time. Domestically scaled against the enormity of what's happening around it, which is exactly the right approach to this period. The Bad Batch covers about 1 to 2 years of the early Imperial period, from Order 66 in 19 BBY to roughly 18 BBY. One of the things it does particularly well is show the texture of how the Empire established itself. It wasn't sudden, it was gradual. Clone troopers were phased out in favour of recruited human stormtroopers, partly because clones were expensive to produce at scale, and partly perhaps because the Empire wanted soldiers who would be loyal through ideology rather than through genetic programming and chip implants. Stormtroopers choose the Empire or are conscripted into it, but the structure of that choice means something different than a biological override. Omega, the young girl the Bad Batch rescue from Kumino, is a pure genetic template of Jango Fett. Essentially, a female clone produced differently, with enhanced intuition and strategic intelligence. Her storyline over 3 seasons is about what family means when your family was manufactured. She's been raised in a facility. She's never had the kind of embedded history and shared experience that makes a family. And then she ends up with these 5 strange soldiers who are doing their best to protect her. And she turns out to be as capable as any of them. And at some point they're a family despite themselves. The Imperial machine in this period is being built from the top down in all sorts of directions. There's a character called Director Krennic, in charge of the Death Star project, who will meet properly in Rogue One. We see here the beginnings of his project, the Erso family being manipulated into working on it, Galen Erso's resistance, and eventual apparent cooperation. The Death Star has been in development for years and years. It is, in some sense, the Empire's entire military philosophy expressed as an object. Not multiple ships capable of responding flexibly, but one overwhelming thing capable of destroying a planet. The logic of deterrence taken to its furthest possible conclusion. On Tatooine, Obi-Wan Kenobi is living as a hermit. He's calling himself Ben. He watches the Lars homestead from a respectful distance. He has nightmares, probably. He doesn't use the Force if he can avoid it because the Inquisitors, former Jedi turned dark side hunters, are looking for survivors, and a Force-sensitive presence is a beacon. He meditates, he waits. He has, as far as anyone can tell, a simply wretched time of it for about 19 years. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series gives us a chapter from around 9 BBY, when a young Leia is kidnapped to draw Obi-Wan out of hiding, and he has to come out of exile to rescue her. The Inquisitor pursuing him is a former Jedi named Reva, whose backstory involves the fall of the Temple and a very specific grudge. And eventually Obi-Wan comes face to face with Vader, a confrontation the films never gave us, set between episodes 30 and 40, with all the weight of everything that happened between them pressing down on every moment of it. Vader wins, which he probably should given where they each are at this point. But it's not a permanent thing. The Andor series, which covers roughly 5 BBY to 0 BBY, is something else entirely. It's the most mature, the most politically intelligent, the most quietly devastating thing the Star Wars brand has produced in the Disney era. Possibly ever, depending on who you ask. Cassian Andor, who we'll meet properly in Rogue One, is here as a young man, a thief, someone who grew up on a planet devastated by corporate extraction and carries that anger like weather. The show is about how the rebellion actually formed, not through speeches and heroism, but through accumulation, through small radicalizing moments, through the slow realization, person by person, that there isn't a reform possible, that the Empire will have to be broken rather than fixed. There's a speech given by a character named Luthen Rael, a rebel spy master, where he describes what he has sacrificed for this cause, what he has become, what he has burned, what he will never be able to recover. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. It's one of the best written monologues in the franchise's history, and it lands because the show has spent enough time showing you what that cost actually looks like in practice day by day. We'll come back to Andor properly when we reach the lead up to Rogue One. Star Wars Rebels is set in the years immediately before A New Hope, following a small crew of people on a freighter called the Ghost who have found each other largely by accident and become something like a family. They're one of dozens of small cells operating against the Empire at this point. Not yet a unified rebellion, just scattered pockets of resistance that are only beginning to talk to each other. The crew, Hera Syndulla, a Twi'lek pilot, and the operational intelligence of the group, who believes in the rebellion as a cause before the rebellion even exists as an organization. Kanan Jarrus, a Jedi who survived Order 66 by running, who has spent years suppressing his connection to the Force and being someone else, and who is slowly, painfully becoming a Jedi again in secret. Ezra Bridger, a teenage street kid from the occupied planet Lothal, who is Force sensitive and has been surviving alone since his parents were taken by the Empire. Sabine Wren, a Mandalorian artist and explosives expert with a complicated family history. Zeb Orrelios, a Lasset who is one of the very few survivors of the Empire's massacre of his people. And Chopper, an astromech droid who has the energy of a slightly aggressive, elderly cat and is brilliant at his job. What the series does particularly well is show the formation of the early Rebel Alliance, the political and logistical work of turning disparate cells into a unified movement. Senator Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, the gradual, difficult process of trust between people who've been surviving independently and who aren't sure yet whether they can afford to depend on anyone else. Ahsoka Tano comes back here. She's been in hiding since Order 66, and later works for the early rebellion under a cover identity. She's older, clearly, and carrying everything that happened, and she has a quiet authority the series earns by taking its time with her. Her eventual confrontation with Vader, her realization of who's inside that mask, is handled with real care. The series ends in a genuinely strange place. Ezra Bridger sacrifices himself to pull a villain called Grand Admiral Thrawn into hyperspace, and they both disappear into the unknown. Where they've gone matters quite a lot for later, so we'll mark that and move on. Rogue One, set immediately before A New Hope, is about the mission to steal the plans for the Death Star. Jyn Erso's father Galen was forced to work on the Death Star's design and deliberately engineered a flaw, a vulnerability in the reactor that can be exploited. He got a message out. Jyn and a rebel intelligence officer named Cassian Andor, who we've been following in his earlier years through Andor, lead a team to retrieve the plans. Everyone dies. The team goes to a planet called Scarif. They steal the plans, they transmit them, and none of them make it off the planet. Jyn and Cassian stand on the beach as the Death Star's weapon arrives, and there's a moment of stillness before it takes them that is one of the most quietly devastating things in the franchise. The film knows from the first frame what its ending is, and it earns every bit of the weight that costs. The final scene of Rogue One flows directly into the opening of A New Hope. The plans are on the Tantive Arfor. The Empire is in pursuit. Darth Vader boards the ship at the end of a corridor, and his breathing fills the frame. It's one of the most effective pieces of connective tissue in modern cinema, and it makes both films better, and so we arrive at the beginning, which is actually, of course, the middle. A New Hope opens in media res. The rebellion has been doing this work for years by the time we join it. The Death Star plans are already on their way somewhere. The first thing we see is a chase through space, and then a boarding action, and then Princess Leia Organa being captured by Darth Vader, and a pair of droids escaping to a desert planet below. Luke Skywalker, when we meet him, is living on a moisture farm on Tatooine with his uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. He's restless in the way that young people are restless when they're reasonably intelligent and living somewhere small and quiet. He wants to be somewhere else, the academy, the war, anywhere that isn't here. He's 19. His uncle is cautious about the future in ways Luke doesn't understand yet, because Luke doesn't know who his father is. The droids are R2-D2, who has the Death Star plans in his memory banks, and a message from Princess Leia, and C-3PO, who provides running commentary on how badly everything is going. Lead Luke to an old hermit named Ben Kenobi. Ben is, of course, Obi-Wan. He gives Luke his father's lightsaber. He begins to explain the Force. He does tell him about Vader. Something worth noting about A New Hope is how little it explains about the world it's set in. We're dropped into the middle of a conflict we know nothing about, following characters whose histories we don't have access to, in a universe with its own rules that we pick up gradually rather than being told directly. George Lucas made this choice deliberately. He wanted the feeling of joining a story midway, of a world that existed before you arrived and would exist after you left. Every detail in the film is specific and lived in, without being explained, which creates the sense of depth that so much science fiction of the era didn't have. They go to a cantina in Mos Eisley and meet a man named Han Solo, who flies a freighter called the Millennium Falcon with his co-pilot, a Wookiee named Chewbacca. Han is a smuggler working off a debt to Jabba the Hutt, mercenary and skeptical of everything. He needs money. The rebels need a ship. This is a transaction that happens to change galactic history. Alderaan, Leia's home planet, is destroyed by the Death Star as a demonstration. 2 billion people. An Imperial gunner presses the button to destroy Alderaan. This is the moment the film's stakes become real. Before Alderaan, the Death Star is a concept. After it, the Death Star is something that can't be undone. Obi-Wan feels it in the Force, a great disturbance, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. The mission to rescue Leia from the Death Star, which they're pulled into rather than planning, involves Obi-Wan going to disable the tractor beam and not coming back from it. His death at Vader's hands is quiet. He simply lets it happen, having apparently arranged to become more powerful in some sense. And Luke's grief is the pivot point that turns him from a passenger into a participant. The Millennium Falcon is a good example of this. It's famously described as a piece of junk, and it looks like a piece of junk, and Han's pride in it is completely irrational from the outside. But you can see in every panel and repair and modification that this ship has had a life. It's not new, it's been places, it's earned the right to be falling apart. The attack on the Death Star itself is a classic piece of action filmmaking that works because it's genuinely tense despite the fact that you know the outcome. Luke's shot into the thermal exhaust port, guided by the Force rather than the targeting computer, on the advice of a voice that sounds like Obi-Wan, is the first real thing we see him do entirely on faith. The Empire loses its ultimate weapon. The Rebellion wins its first battle. The calendar pivots. Everything before this is BBY. Everything after is ABY. A farm boy and a torpedo change what year it is. 3 years later. The Rebellion has been on the run since the Battle of Yavin, setting up base wherever they can. When we join them at the film's start, they're on Hoth, which is essentially the least hospitable place imaginable. All ice and blizzards and giant creatures that eat people in the night. The Empire finds them. They have to leave. The film splits its two main threads at this point. Han and Leia, on the Falcon, with a hyperdrive that won't work, are running from the Empire through an asteroid field and eventually to Cloud City on the gas planet Bespin. Luke goes to Dagobah, which is a swamp planet with almost no qualities that recommend it, because Obi-Wan's voice has been telling him to go there. On Dagobah, Luke meets Yoda. Luke, who is, if you didn't know what you were looking at, a small green creature living alone in a swamp, eating something from a pot and being slightly difficult about everything. The reveal that this is who Luke has come to find is one of cinema's great undercut moments. The most powerful Jedi alive lives in a hut. He eats whatever's in that pot. He tests Luke by being annoying before he agrees to train him. Yoda's philosophy of the Force is simpler and stranger than anything else in the films. Luminous beings, are we, not this crude matter. The Force isn't a power you develop, it's a relationship you deepen. The failure modes he identifies in Luke, impatience, aggression, fear, are exactly the failure modes that destroyed his father, which Luke doesn't know yet. The cave on Dagobah, where Yoda sends Luke to face what he'll find, and Luke finds Vader with his own face inside the mask, is one of the film's quiet master strokes. It's not a prophecy. It's not Yoda showing Luke a vision. It's the dark side of the Force. It shows you what you're afraid of and what you're drawn to. Luke is afraid of becoming Vader. He's also more drawn to that path than he knows, or the dark side wouldn't bother showing it to him. The cave has no monsters in it that Luke didn't bring himself. Han and Leia's storyline is essentially a road trip that's also a love story. The Falcon is broken, and they're stuck together in close quarters, and they argue constantly, and you can see quite early on that they're not going to be able to keep pretending they don't care about each other. I Know remains one of the better pieces of screenwriting in the series, and it lands because the film has done the work to earn it. The asteroid field sequence, which is primarily about Han and Leia being in close quarters for a while, is excellent because it slows down. The film isn't in a hurry here. There's a scene where Han repairs something on the Falcon, with Leia helping him, and they get very close together, and then C-3PO interrupts, and Han's face is actually funny. The comedy is character. You understand these people more from the interrupted kiss than from any amount of exposition. Cloud City is Lando Calrissian's operation. He runs it. He keeps it independent from the Empire. He's an old friend of Han's with a past that involved the Millennium Falcon changing hands at some point. He's been compromised. The Empire was already there when they arrived. The trap is set. Han is carbon frozen and sent to Jabba. Leia, Chewie, and Lando escape. Lando Calrissian gets a somewhat raw deal in how he's remembered, I think. He's presented as a betrayer, someone who sold out Han to the Empire, and he did. But the film also shows you why. He was responsible for an entire floating city of people who had nothing to do with the rebellion, who hadn't chosen this conflict, and the Empire had the leverage to destroy all of them. He made a bad deal to save his people, and then the Empire kept moving the goalposts as they do, and eventually the deal got bad enough that he stopped honouring it. He joins the rebellion because the alternative became unconscionable. The arc from compliance to resistance is one of the more realistic things the film does. Luke comes to Cloud City because he's had visions of his friends suffering. a repeat of the pattern that destroyed Anakin. He leaves his training unfinished against everyone's advice. He fights Vader. He loses badly. He loses his hand. Vader backs him to a gantry above a reactor shaft and tells him the truth. He is Luke's father. And Luke, rather than accept this or fight it, drops into the shaft. He's rescued by the Falcon. The revelation still works. It works because it reframes the entire first film. Vader standing in the corridor, at the end of Rogue One. Vader hunting the pilot who destroyed the Death Star. Vader who felt something strange in the Force during the battle. All of it suddenly has a different quality. He wasn't just hunting a rebel, he was hunting his son. He was hunting his son without knowing it. The film ends with the rebellion scattered, Han gone, Luke's hand replaced with a mechanical one, and no resolution. It trusts its audience to sit with that. The rescue of Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt's palace is one of those plans that sounds more complicated than it is, but is actually more complicated than it sounds. It involves a 2D2 and C-3PO going in as gifts, Leia going in disguised as a bounty hunter with Chewbacca as her prisoner, Lando going in disguised as a guard, and Luke going in as himself, which is either confidence or poor planning. Jabba sees through most of this almost immediately, and for a moment things look quite bad. They're not ultimately, because Leia strangles Jabba with her own chain, and Luke manages to catch his lightsaber out of a 2D2's head in a way that's impractical but visually satisfying. Boba Fett falls into the Sarlacc pit during the chaos. This appears to be his death. We'll come back to that. The plan for the rest of the film involves destroying the second Death Star, which is under construction, by taking out its shield generator on the forest moon of Endor. The Ewoks, small bear-like natives who live there, decide to help the rebellion after C-3PO tells them their story. The debate about the Ewoks has been going on since 1983 and will presumably continue until the sun expands. I don't have a strong view. They're fine. Luke, meanwhile, surrenders to Vader, voluntarily. He's told his friends he'll meet them on Endor after, and then just walks into the Imperial camp. His plan, if you can call it that, is to face Vader and try to reach the person who was his father. Not to fight him, not to destroy him, to redeem him. This is not a strategy that would have worked against anyone else in the saga, and probably shouldn't have worked against Vader, and the film goes to some lengths to show how close it comes to not working. The Emperor is, it turns out, exactly as patient and confident as you'd expect from someone who spent 40 years getting to this moment. He sits in his throne room and watches Luke try to fight Vader without wanting to kill him, and is quite visibly enjoying himself. He provokes Luke into actual anger. Luke nearly kills Vader. Then Vader mentions Leia, that there is another Skywalker, and Luke loses it. He fights with genuine ferocity, cuts off Vader's mechanical hand, looks at his own mechanical hand, and stops. He throws his lightsaber aside. He will not do this. The Emperor sentences him to death. Vader, who has been watching all of this, and who has been watching his son choose to die rather than become what he became, picks the Emperor up and throws him into the reactor shaft. He dies doing it. The suit is damaged, the life support fails, his lungs can't keep up. Luke takes the mask off. Anakin Skywalker, not Darth Vader, dies looking at his son. The galaxy is free. The Death Star falls. The Empire loses in a single night, essentially, because they built a command structure so centralized that losing the Emperor and Vader simultaneously is catastrophic. The parties on Endor are very nice. The film ends with Luke burning his father's armor on a pyre and seeing 3 Force ghosts at the edge of the forest: Obi-Wan, Yoda and Anakin, young again, at peace. There's something philosophically interesting about the way the Jedi understand death that the films gesture at without fully explaining. Obi-Wan's ability to become a Force ghost, to persist after death as a consciousness that can communicate with the living, isn't something every Jedi can do. It's a specific skill, a form of training, and it was actually taught to Qui-Gon first, who began learning it and passed the knowledge on to Yoda and Obi-Wan before he died. In the prequels, the Jedi don't know how to do this. Jedi deaths during the Clone Wars are permanent. The ability to survive death as a presence in the Force is something Qui-Gon discovered, and it was the last thing he had to teach. Which means that when Obi-Wan says, "If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine," he's not being vague. He knows exactly what he means. He's been working on this. The choice to let Vader kill him on the Death Star is, in a sense, a practiced choice. He's rehearsed it. The equanimity with which he faces it isn't resignation, it's preparation. Yoda's death in Return of the Jedi, at 900 years old, is very calm. He just tells Luke what he needs to know, confirms what Luke already knows about Vader, and fades. 900 years is quite a long time to have been alive, and I imagine that when you've been alive for 900 years, dying isn't particularly frightening anymore. It's just the next thing. Yoda has seen empires rise and fall. He's been in hiding for 20 years. He's done his part. He goes peacefully, which is the Jedi ideal and also just the most sensible response to being 900. Now here's something the films sort of skip over. The Empire didn't just stop existing when the Emperor died. It fractured, it retreated, it fought on. The New Republic that formed in the power vacuum was trying to negotiate with Imperial factions, fighting Imperial holdouts, managing the political nightmare of a galaxy that had been centrally controlled for 20 years, suddenly having to figure out what democracy looked like again. It's considerably messier than the victory celebration at the end of Jedi suggests. The Mandalorian, set in 9 ABY, 5 years after Return of the Jedi, gives us a galaxy where the Empire has officially fallen, but where remnants are still operating in the Outer Rim, where the New Republic is doing its best, but hasn't quite reached everywhere yet. It's a frontier story, really, in the best sense. The protagonist is Din Djarin, a Mandalorian foundling who works as a bounty hunter. He wears armor, never removes his helmet before any living thing, and is quietly excellent at his job. The Mandalorian's first season does something deceptively simple and quite effective. It's structured as a mostly serialized story, each episode still feeling like its own adventure, in a different corner of the same world. The through line is Grogu, but the texture is variety. Then gradually, the texture stops being variety and starts being a story, and you realize this happened without you quite noticing. The casting of Pedro Pascal as Din Djarin, who is barely seen with his face for the first 2 seasons, is worth a mention. The performance is entirely physical and vocal. How he moves, how he tilts his head, how his voice changes when he's talking to Grogu versus when he's talking to literally anyone else. There's a scene in season 1 where he's sitting up all night while Grogu sleeps in his floating pod, just watching over him, and nothing needs to be said. A brief note on Mandalorians. They're a warrior culture with a complicated history. Din belongs to a sect called the Tribe, foundlings taken in and raised in the Mandalorian way, the creed. For them, the helmet is sacred. You never remove it. It's not vanity or paranoia, it's identity, faith, continuity. This detail matters enormously later. The Night of 1,000 Tears, the name given to the Imperial massacre of Mandalore, which happened a few years before the series begins, is referenced but not shown. The Empire bombarded the planet and killed enormous numbers of Mandalorians, essentially ending their civilization as a planetary force and scattering the survivors. Din's people, the Tribe, are survivors of this. Their secrecy, their underground movement, their complete distrust of the outside world, it all makes sense in this context. There are people in hiding because the last time they weren't hiding, they nearly ceased to exist. In the first episode, Din accepts a bounty. The target turns out to be a small green creature with enormous ears and enormous eyes who can barely walk yet and is about 50 years old. Grogu, force sensitive, wanted by remnant Imperial forces for reasons that emerge slowly over the series. Din completes the job, delivers him, has a think about it, goes back and takes him. This is not rational decision-making, but it's the right one. And the rest of the series is essentially about two people who don't have family. One who lost his as a child to a war, one who lost his to whatever happened after Order 66, figuring out that they've become each other's. The mystery of Grogu's past unfolds slowly. He was at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant when Order 66 happened. Someone carried him out. He remembers people, faces without names. He spent 30 years hiding, suppressing his Force signature, and then somehow ended up as a bounty. Where exactly he was during those 30 years isn't fully answered, which is either a storytelling gap or a deliberate mystery for later. Probably the latter. Moff Gideon is the main antagonist, an Imperial officer operating in the Outer Rim with a significant force and a specific interest in Grogu's blood, which carries the genetic imprint of his Force sensitivity. He has the Darksaber, an ancient Mandalorian weapon that is also a symbol of leadership for Mandalorian culture, and whose possession is its own complicated political problem. The Darksaber has its own history that the show handles carefully. It's an ancient lightsaber built by the first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order, Tara Vizsla, thousands of years ago. When the Jedi died, Mandalorians stole it from the temple. It became a symbol of Mandalorian leadership. Whoever wields it has a claim on leadership of the people. Bo-Katan Kryze, a Mandalorian we meet in Season 2 and whose history stretches back through the Clone Wars and Rebels, wants it. Moff Gideon has it. Din wins it from Gideon and doesn't want it at all, which is its own kind of problem. The second season ends with Luke Skywalker arriving to take Grogu for training. It's an earned moment, handled with care. Din removes his helmet to say goodbye to Grogu, the first time he's done it before a living being of his own choice. Grogu reaches up and touches his face, then goes with Luke. Then, not long after, decides he'd rather go back to Din. Boba Fett did not, as it turns out, die in the Sarlacc. He survived barely, crawling out of the thing after a horrific amount of time inside it, armorless, nearly dead, and landing on Tatooine. This is covered in the flashback sections of The Book of Boba Fett, which alternate between Boba's past recovery and his present attempt to take over Jabba's criminal territory. The flashback sections are the best parts of the show. Boba is taken in by a tribe of Tusken Raiders, the same culture Anakin killed in a grief rage 30 years before, though neither Boba nor we are drawing that parallel explicitly. He learns their ways, he fights with them, he earns their respect through the simple method of being competent and reliable and respectful of their customs. There's a sequence with a train that serves as both an exciting action scene and a genuine character moment for him. He helps them. They give him Mandalorian-style armor in return. Then they're killed while he's away. Another thing he couldn't prevent. He loses his armor to the Jawas and moves on. In the present-day storyline, Boba and Fennec Shand, a mercenary and assassin who owes him her life, have taken over Jabba's palace and his territory on Tatooine with the stated ambition of running the criminal underworld through respect rather than fear. The Pike Syndicate, an organised crime group with a long history in the galaxy, tests this immediately. The conflict that results is not quite as interesting as the flashbacks, though it has its moments. The 3 episodes that essentially become The Mandalorian Season 2.5, where Din is trying to get a new ship, Grogu is briefly training with Luke and making his choice, and everyone converges back on Tatooine, are a different kind of highlight. Grogu has a choice presented to him, a lightsaber and the Jedi path, or Din's Beskar chainmail and the Mandalorian path. He picks the armor, he picks Din, which any reasonable person watching the show could have told you he was going to do, and which is still completely satisfying when it happens. Chronologically, Solo, a Star Wars story, sits well before the Mandalorian era, around 13 to 10 BBY, placing it between Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One. It makes thematic sense to pause here and spend some time with it, because it's essentially a character study of someone we've known since 1977. Han Solo, at 18 or 19, is not quite the man we'll meet in Mos Eisley. He's a bit softer, more idealistic maybe, not naive exactly, but not yet the person who spent a decade carefully pretending he didn't believe in anything. He's on Corellia, a shipbuilding world, and he's running with a criminal gang, and he's desperately in love with a girl named Chira. They try to get out. Han gets out. Chira doesn't quite. She's pulled back and he can't reach her. He joins the Imperial Navy with the specific plan of becoming a pilot and going back for her. He never goes back for her. Or rather, when they meet again years later, too much has happened to either of them. This is the wound under all of Han's armour, maybe. The person he was before the galaxy got to him. He gets thrown out of the Naval Academy for insubordination, ends up in the infantry, meets a Wookiee named Chewbacca in a pit, and they escape together. Chewie has been with him since, which is one of the more straightforwardly lovely relationships in the saga. The Kessel Run comes up here, and it's worth a moment because it's one of those bits of Star Wars lore that gets misunderstood. When Han boasts in A New Hope about making the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, the common assumption is that he's confused distance with time, or that it's an error in the film. It's neither. The Kessel Run, as explained in Solo, involves navigating near a cluster of black holes called the Maw, a region that distorts space-time significantly. The standard route goes around the Maw. Han, in a desperate situation, cuts through it, shortening the route. 12 parsecs is the distance he covered by taking the dangerous shortcut, and the number is impressive because nobody does it that way. The gravitational distortions are generally fatal. He's not confused about what parsecs are. He's boasting about doing something that shouldn't have worked. Lando Calrissian appears here in full cape and full charm, the original owner of the Millennium Falcon before he lost it to Han in a game of cards, or cheated out of it, depending on who you ask. His relationship with the Falcon is both genuine affection and lingering resentment, which is consistent with everything we'll see from him later. The final scene involves a surprise appearance by Darth Maul, now running a criminal organisation that exists partly to set up sequel films that never happened, but it's a striking cameo regardless. Ahsoka Tano's Solo series picks up around the same time as The Mandalorian in the years just after the Empire's fall. She's been working in the emerging rebellion, and then the New Republic's interests, and now she has a specific mission: find Grand Admiral Thrawn. Thrawn is worth a proper introduction. He's a Chiss, blue-skinned, red-eyed, from a species that exists at the edge of the known galaxy, who rose to Grand Admiral in the Empire not through cruelty or politics, but through sheer tactical intelligence. He studies his enemy's art. He understands culture as a strategic resource. He never loses a battle through overconfidence, which makes him uniquely dangerous. He was last seen in Star Wars Rebels, being pulled into hyperspace by Ezra Bridger, along with his fleet, and he has been gone for about 10 years. Where he's gone is, as it turns out, another galaxy. The series introduces Sabine Wren, Ezra's old Rebels crewmate, who's been living on Lothal since the end of the war. Hera Syndulla reappears as a New Republic general. The political thread running through the show is about the New Republic's unwillingness to take the threat of Thrawn's return seriously. They've won, they're consolidating, they don't particularly want to believe there's another major Imperial figure waiting to come back. A map has been found, a map to this other galaxy, where Thrawn and Ezra disappeared. Enemies are pursuing it. Ahsoka and Sabine are pursuing it. Eventually, everyone ends up going. The world between worlds appears here briefly. It's a force realm that exists between moments in time, connected to all points simultaneously. Ahsoka had been there before, pulled out of a moment of death by Ezra through it. In the Ahsoka series, she has a near-death experience that takes her there, and what she finds is Anakin. One more time. Animated, voiced by the same actor, in a different form. The conversation they have isn't the one either of us might have expected. It's not a reckoning, it's more like a resolution. He's teaching her still. She's learning still. She always was his Padawan. The far galaxy, Peridea, is ancient and mostly dying. The Night Sisters of Dathomir have a presence there, and their thread is its own interesting thing. Thrawn has been preparing to return. Ezra Bridger is found, alive and well, and gets home. Thrawn and his fleet make it back through the hyperspace ring before the heroes can stop them. The series ends with Thrawn returning to the galaxy and Ahsoka stranded on Peridea with her Mandalorian apprentice, Sabine Wren. The story continues. It always continues. A lighter section, this one. Skeleton Crew is set roughly in the same period as the Mandalorian shows, the same fragile New Republic, the same outer rim that hasn't quite been reached by stability yet, but it comes at it from a completely different angle. 4 children from a hidden, safe, orderly planet called Atatin accidentally end up in space. They don't know that the wider galaxy exists. Their whole world has been one carefully maintained settlement, and suddenly they're in the middle of it. Pirates, criminals, ancient treasure, all of it. Jude Law plays a figure called Jod Nana Wood, whose real name and history are revealed slowly over the course of the series. He's not quite what he appears to be, and the show is patient about how it handles that. What Skeleton Crew does, essentially, is give you the galaxy through eyes that have never seen it. These children don't carry the weight of the Empire. They don't have the context for why everything is the way it is. They just encounter it, fresh and sometimes terrifying and sometimes wonderful. There's something quite restful about that perspective, actually, seeing this world we know so well as genuinely unknown. The show also contributes something useful to this era's broader picture. The New Republic's stability is patchy, fragile in specific ways. There are corners of the galaxy where the change of government has meant almost nothing for daily life, where power belongs to whoever has the most ships or the most willingness to use them. That context matters for what comes next, which we're getting to. The Wren's real history, what he actually was before the identity he's wearing now, is the show's central mystery, and the series is patient about revealing it. He's clearly capable of considerably more than he lets on. There are moments where you see something underneath the performance, some older skill or older guilt, and the show trusts you to wait for the explanation, which, given that this is a show about children told at a child's pace, is a slightly unexpected quality. It has more restraint than you'd expect. What the show adds to this era's picture underneath its adventure structure is a sense of geography. The galaxy is genuinely large. There are places in it where the New Republic is a rumour rather than a government, where you could grow up your whole life in safety and comfort and have no idea that half the systems around you are lawless or desperate or still sorting out what the Empire's fall even meant for them. Atatin is one of those places. The kids from there aren't naive exactly. They're just uninformed in the specific way that sheltered people are uninformed. And the galaxy, once you're actually in it, is quite a lot to take in. 30 years. That's how long passes between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And in those 30 years, a great deal happened, most of it off-screen, which is either a frustrating gap or an interesting invitation, depending on how you approach it. The New Republic consolidated, Luke Skywalker tried to start a new Jedi Order and trained a group of students. One of those students was Ben Solo, Han and Leia's son, who was Force-sensitive from birth, and who Leia, worried about his darkness, sent to train with his uncle. Something went wrong. Luke felt darkness in Ben, and for one moment in the night, considered stopping it before it could grow. Ben woke and saw him, and whatever trust had existed between them didn't survive that moment. He destroyed the temple. He killed the other students. He joined a figure called Snoke in the dark. He became Kylo Ren. Luke disappeared. The galaxy has been looking for him since. The New Republic has been destroyed. The First Order, a military movement grown from Imperial remnants in the unknown regions with funding and support that the New Republic chose not to investigate too closely, fired a weapon called Star Killer Base that destroyed the Republic's capital system in a single shot. They're gone. The Resistance, a smaller force that Leia has been running for years, which the New Republic never officially endorsed because they didn't want to provoke the First Order, is what's left. Rey is scavenging for parts on Jakku. She's been there since childhood, waiting for someone to come back for her. She's alone, competent in the specific way that people are competent when their survival has depended on being competent, and she has a Force connection she doesn't understand because she's never been trained. She meets Finn, a stormtrooper, who grew up in the First Order system, who was trained from childhood, who saw something in combat that he couldn't reconcile with what he'd been trained to believe and decided to get out. And BB-8 carrying half a map to Luke Skywalker in his memory. The film's best decision, looking back, is keeping its central mystery not about the plot but about the characters. Who is Rey? Who is Finn, really, beneath the conditioning? What happened to Luke? What is Kylo Ren trying to become? And why isn't he succeeding? These are all character questions dressed as plot questions, and they're more interesting than the Starkiller Base. Finn's arc is worth spending more time on. He's FN 21A Tyson, raised from childhood by the First Order, kidnapped as a baby, raised as a soldier, given a number rather than a name. His defection after his first combat mission is framed as individual moral awakening, and it is, but it's also a crack in a system that was supposed to eliminate exactly that kind of moral reasoning. The First Order's Stormtrooper program is specifically designed to prevent individuals from developing the kind of inner life that allows for defection. That Finn does it anyway says something about the limits of conditioning when confronted with something specific and real and wrong. Han Solo and Chewbacca turn up, which is either inevitable or exactly right. Han is older and running cargo again and has been putting distance between himself and everything since Ben turned. The Millennium Falcon has been on Jakku. He sees it on a scanner, and there's a pause, and then he's going toward it. Some things you can't leave behind. Poe Dameron is, essentially, Han Solo's role in this trilogy. The charismatic, confident one who flies things and is good at almost everything. Oscar Isaac brings a warmth to the role that makes Poe more than the function, and his friendship with Finn is one of the trilogy's genuine pleasures. The film ends with Starkiller Base destroyed, Kylo Ren wounded, and Finn in medical care. Rey has found the map, followed it to a remote ocean planet called Arch 2, and climbed an ancient Jedi cliff to find an old man with his hood up, who turns out to be Luke. She holds out his lightsaber. He looks at it. The film ends there. The use of practical effects mixed with digital in The Force Awakens, a deliberate decision after the criticism of the prequel's reliance on CGI, gives the film a texture closer to the original trilogy. Sets that feel like sets, creatures that have weight. The Millennium Falcon looks worn because it was made to look worn, not because someone calculated what worn should look like. Small thing, noticeable. Han dies before all this, on a bridge, by Ben's hand. It's quiet and it's awful, and the film is right to not linger on it. What it does instead is linger on Chewie, who saw it, who has been Han's partner for decades, who walks past Leia without stopping because whatever grief Chewie is carrying in that moment, there's no language for it. The Last Jedi is the most divisive film in the franchise's history, and probably the most interesting. Worth acknowledging both of those things, and then just getting on with it. Luke doesn't want to train Rey. He's done with the Jedi. He's been on Arch 2 for years, and in that time, he's come to a particular conclusion, that the Jedi Order failed, that it failed specifically because of its arrogance, that it was present at the creation of Darth Vader and couldn't see it happening, and that the best thing he can do for the galaxy is let the Jedi tradition end. The sacred texts are right there in a tree. He's not opened them in years. Rey, who needs a teacher, pushes back on all of this. She's extraordinary. Her access to the Force is immediate and powerful in a way that's almost alarming, and she can see that something in Luke is not quite right. Something broke him. We find out what. He stood over sleeping Ben with a lightsaber and thought about ending it before it was too late, and then didn't, but the damage was done. Luke counts this as his greatest failure, the moment the Jedi's arrogance destroyed the last thing he was trying to protect. What the film does that's unusual, and for which it's both praised and criticised, is refuse the structure of the previous films. The things you expect to happen don't happen the way you expect. Snoke is killed by Kylo Ren rather than being the final villain. Rey reaches out to Ben and doesn't save him, not really. Luke doesn't return to lead the rebellion. The film is interested in the question of what breaks tradition and what grows beyond it. Yoda appears, Force ghost form, small and mischievous, and exactly as he always was. He burns the sacred tree, laughing, and then he tells Luke something that becomes the thematic centre of the whole film. We are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters. He'd already noticed that Rey took the texts. He was laughing because Luke was about to do something unnecessarily dramatic about something that was already handled. The dynamic between Rey and Kylo Ren, through their Force connection conversations, is the heart of the film's middle section. They're appearing to each other across the galaxy, and neither of them quite understands the mechanism. What's interesting about their scenes together is that they're both doing the same thing, trying to see if the other person can be redeemed or turned. Kylo wants Rey to come to the dark side with him, to rule and reshape the galaxy from outside both the First Order's brutality and the Jedi's failures. Rey wants Ben back. They're both wrong about each other and both right about each other. The connection between them is genuine, real empathy passing both ways, and neither of them quite knows what to do with that. The thread about Canto Bight, a casino city, rich and glittering, and built on arms dealing and slave labour, is thematically important, even if narratively the side quest doesn't pay off the way the film intends. The point it's making is that the war isn't just between the Resistance and the First Order. It's maintained by people who profit from both sides remaining in conflict. The galaxy's misery is someone's business model. This is a darker observation than Star Wars usually makes explicitly, and it lands with some weight. The Holdo maneuver deserves its moment. Vice Admiral Holdo, commanding the Resistance fleet as it's being picked apart by the First Order, turns the Resistance flagship around, angles it at the First Order fleet, and jumps to hyperspace. The result is a hyperspace collision, the ship passing through multiple First Order vessels at light speed. There's no sound. There's just the visual of the impact unfolding in slow motion, white light eating through destroyer after destroyer, and then silence. It's about 4 seconds long, and it's one of the most visually striking things in the entire saga. Director Rian Johnson deliberately cut the sound, which was a risk and it was the right one. The question the Holdo maneuver raises, why don't people just do this all the time? Send an unmanned ship at light speed through a fleet, is a fair one, and the canon has since addressed it as a maneuver that requires specific conditions and considerable sacrifice. But in the moment, it's not a logic problem. It's a visual statement about what desperation looks like at the scale of a war. Luke's death is the film's emotional climax. He projects himself across the galaxy to the Resistance's last stand on a salt planet, appearing to Kylo Ren, appearing to Leia, buying the survivors time to escape. It's a Force technique of extraordinary cost. He uses it and sits down on the cliff on Arch-To to watch a twin sunset. Not Tatooine's, but the same gesture, and fades into the Force. He's at peace. He finished what he started. Somehow Palpatine returned? That's the actual text. It's broadcast across the galaxy as a message from a voice everyone recognizes, and nobody quite knows how to process it, because everyone watched him die falling down a reactor shaft 31 years ago. The answer, worked out through the film rather than explained up front, is Sith alchemy, cloning, and the kind of preparation that requires a very long game. He had contingencies for his own death. He has always been planning. Rey, it turns out, is his granddaughter. He had a son who rejected him entirely, who lived and died as a nobody on Jakku, who left behind a daughter he hoped Palpatine would never find. She has his power. She always did, which is the explanation the film offers for the extraordinary Force ability she showed from the very beginning. She's been running from that heritage her whole life without knowing what she was running from. The film is genuinely ambitious. It's trying to resolve everything: Rey's past, Ben's redemption, Palpatine's final plan, the fate of the Resistance. It doesn't always have the space to do all of this properly. There's a sense throughout that the film is in a hurry, that it's covering ground it wishes it had laid out more gradually. Some of what it's doing works beautifully. Some of it doesn't quite land. Ben Solo's return is one of the things that works. Han's memory, a brief moment on a destroyed Death Star. I know. Ben throws his lightsaber into the sea and comes to fight alongside Rey in the film's climax. He heals her. She defeats Palpatine, drawing on the power of all the Jedi who came before her. A full circle from the 1,000 years of Darth Bane's shadow, finally ending. Ben gives her his life in the healing. He dies looking content, which after everything is the kindest thing the film could give him. Rey takes the name Skywalker. She stands on Tatooine at the Lars homestead, the place where Luke grew up, on the same world where Anakin grew up. Not in the physical sense, but the world that shaped both of them. She buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers in the desert. She ignites her own golden something new. 2 suns on the horizon. The thing that's true about the saga as a whole, when you see it all together, when you go from Anakin on Tatooine at 9 years old to Rey on Tatooine at the end, is that it's fundamentally a story about what we inherit and what we choose. Anakin inherited the Force and chose fear. Luke inherited Anakin's fall and chose to stand in it without becoming it. Rey inherited the Emperor's blood and chose to be something else. The circle closes. The Skywalker saga ends. We touched on Andor briefly in the Imperial era section, but it deserves its own space here. Partly because the 2nd season arrived recently and expanded the story considerably, and partly because it's doing something so different from most of what we've covered that it warrants sitting with on its own terms. Cassian Andor's childhood was on a planet called Kenari, a world that was effectively destroyed by corporate extraction. The Empire's precursor allowed a mining operation to functionally poison and isolate an entire population. He was taken off-world as a child, not exactly rescued, adopted by a scavenger family on another planet. His anger comes from that loss, and from what he sees around him, and from the accumulating evidence that the people with power don't care about the people without it. The radicalization arc in Andor is notable for how gradually it builds. This isn't a moment of inspiration or a speech. It's one thing, and then another thing, and then another. And at some point, Cassian is doing what he's doing, not because someone convinced him, but because the logic of his situation has made it the only coherent choice. The show understands radicalization as a process, which is more true and more interesting than most depictions of it. Luthen Rael is a character who operates as a rebel spy master, funding and connecting resistance cells from a cover identity as an art dealer. He's been doing this for years. The cost of it is visible in him. He's not bitter exactly, but he has closed off parts of himself to make this possible. There's a monologue he gives about sacrifice that is, without question, the best single piece of writing in the Disney-era Star Wars. He describes burning his life for a cause whose dawn he will never see. He says he has given away his ability to have a normal life, to feel at peace, to rest, because those things have become incompatible with what he has chosen. It's devastating, and it's delivered quietly, and it's exactly the kind of thing this franchise has never said quite this directly before. Mon Mothma, a senator we've always seen in the rebellion, the dignified face of the resistance, is here as a woman trying to funnel money to the rebellion while maintaining her Senate position. The personal cost of that is explored with more detail than anyone previously thought to give her. Her marriage is hollow. Her daughter is a stranger. She is spending every day performing normality while funding the end of the government she's nominally part of. The performance required of her is exhausting. The Narkina 5 prison arc, in which Cassian ends up in an Imperial prison doing forced labour, and slowly pieces together that the prisoners aren't going to be released because they've seen too much of the facility, is some of the finest sustained television of the last few years. The scale of it is small, the logic of it is airtight, the way it escalates through collective action rather than individual heroism is genuinely moving. The second season of Andor moves closer to the events of Rogue One, and there's a quality to it, now that we know where Cassian ends up, of watching someone become who they were always going to be. The choices he makes in Season 2 are choices he probably couldn't have made in Season 1. Not because he's become braver, but because he's become clearer. He knows what he's doing and why he's doing it, and what it's going to cost, and he does it anyway. Bix Kalene's storyline in the second season is quietly devastating. She was tortured in the first season using an audio weapon that has left her with permanent psychological damage. She hears a sound that nobody else can hear, and it breaks her down every time. Watching her try to function, try to remain useful to the people she loves, is some of the most honest depiction of trauma as ongoing condition in the franchise. She doesn't get better in a dramatic scene. She manages, or she doesn't, day by day. Mon Mothma's arc in the second season brings her closer to the moment she becomes the face of the rebellion we see in Return of the Jedi, the dignified, composed senator in exile who addresses the Alliance with confidence. But the path there goes through years of performance and sacrifice that the later film doesn't have room to show. By the time we see her in Jedi, she's already paid everything the second season of Andor shows her paying. The dignity is real. It's just expensive. Andor's second season brings us right up to the events of Rogue One, and there are moments where you can see the shape of that film beginning to form. Cassian Andor going from a thief to a soldier, from a pragmatist to someone willing to die for something. And he does. He always was going to. So that's most of it, really, or most of the large things at least. There's always more, years of comics and novels and animated series that fill in corners and expand on moments that the main films and shows only touched. The High Republic books are their own entire world. The Mandalorian story isn't finished. The Mandalorian and Grogu is in production as a theatrical film, and whatever that becomes will push the story further into the 9 ABY period and beyond. There are Rey films in various stages of development. There's always something else coming, in a galaxy this large. What strikes me, going through all of it in order like this, is how much of it is about the same small number of questions. What do you owe the people you love, versus what you owe the rest of the world? What happens when you can't have both? What does it mean to be shaped by something, a trauma, a prophecy, a bloodline, and to choose to be something else anyway? Anakin couldn't do it. Luke could. Rey could. The saga is basically the same question asked 3 times, in progressively harder circumstances, and the answer keeps being that it's possible, it's just not easy, and it will cost you something you can't fully anticipate. There's one more thing worth saying, which is about the sheer scale of what this galaxy created over its storytelling history. Star Wars as a franchise has been going in some form since 1977, and the accumulated weight of it, all the films, all the shows, all the novels and comics and games, represents one of the larger acts of collective imagination in contemporary culture. Millions of people have grown up with some version of this, have had specific films they saw as children that became load-bearing structures in how they think about good and evil, and courage and loss. That's not nothing. The stories we tell ourselves about what it means to be good, about whether people can change, about what you owe the people you love, versus what you owe the rest of the world, those stories matter. Star Wars has been telling a version of them for nearly 50 years, sometimes clumsily, sometimes magnificently, sometimes in ways that contradict previous versions of the same story, but consistently, and with a kind of faith in the audience's capacity to care about it all. I think about Grogu a lot. I know that's a bit odd. He's a fictional small green creature with enormous ears who makes slightly surprised faces at everything. But he's also someone who survived something catastrophic as a baby, who spent decades hiding and suppressing who he was, and who found family at the point in his very long life